Hey, welcome back everyone. Rob here from Ramp Studio Comics, and so in today's video I want to show you how to do some foreshortening, or really just an exercise that I think helps with foreshortening. So as you know, I like practicing this stuff a lot because I really want characters that pop off the page, and no better way to do that than practice your foreshortening. So one of the things I want to start with, just in case you're a very beginner, is just practice a technique as simple as this. Create two ovals, connect them together, and bam, you got depth and dimension. Isn't that fancy? And so just practice that. So do one small, one large, and just throw these all over the place. I'm sorry, I'm a little messy there. I haven't warmed up a whole lot, you can tell. But this is kind of a neat thing. It makes you start to think more dimensionally about something. Like, what if this was a big cylinder? And you could get in here and shade it and detail it to your heart's content. But see how that just immediately gives us a sense of depth? You could take it a bit further, and you could do these wrapping lines, which I really recommend this on almost anything, but definitely for like drawing the body and figuring out depth perception. It's a really easy way to do that. And these wrapping lines kind of force you to almost think more dimensionally about whatever it is you're doing. So you can do little things like this. But again, just a very basic exercise. It doesn't have to be circles. It can be rectangles as well. Try bringing it together really, really far. And there you go. That's basic perspective drawing, right? And all of a sudden, you're looking down at a building or something. So it's just super effective for warming up and kind of grasping a sense of perspective. Again, this is going to seem boring if you're not as much of a beginner, but I don't know. I still think it's important. Even I've been drawing for a long time, and I practice this every now and then. So it's just something that helps us, again, see more dimensionally on the page. All these little exercises. Let's try it with a triangle. And again, really push that way back into the distance, make it really small. And maybe put another one down here. And I think this is good practice for, architectural as well, right? So you start segmenting into here. All sorts of fun you can have with this. Look at this. Whee! Lots of fun. No, but I really do think it's important. So practice stuff like that, especially because the neat thing about this is since you're not thinking about a specific thing, I think it sparks creativity. You're truly just working muscle memory and activity, logging in some doodles, some scribbles, and I don't know, it seems to help. So give it a try. So now, what I want to do is apply this to character drawing. So this is what I find myself doing, and you can let me know if this applies to you or not. But so I go to put a shoulder in, and I'm like, well, there's an arm here. It's coming out towards the camera here. There's a hand here. Right, and I use these blocky-like shapes, as I've explained this in plenty of other videos. Kind of like how to draw the Marvel way, right? Which is great lessons. It's pretty much what we all rely upon in the comic art community. We're all in love with that book, right? And video series. So, there you go. You got an arm in perspective, and you do the same thing with the fingers. I generally will do 2 segments to the fingers at first, and I'll also try to pay attention to the way that they bend away from one another or together. There's certain patterns to look for. And generally, I'll start with a gesture, but I just want to kind of follow the same process of the cylinders for this particular method. So very boxy, but it gets the job done. It gets a sense of perspective going. And this might be perfect for a particular shot, but then what if I want a very exaggerated version? So let's try that, again. And again, this is something I just play around with and practice. I'm not going to say this is the right way to do it. You have to experiment and try these things and see if they help you. But what I would say is really just the same concept, but really pushing the exaggeration as we get closer to camera. So for instance, the upper arm might even be relatively the same, maybe a little bit more steep kind of perspective line. So when I'm drawing these lines on the sides of the cylinder, I'm just trying to compress those inward more at the part where they meet the shoulder. In this case, just a spherical kind of object. Even the shoulder isn't really a sphere. It's more of a upside down diamond with a wedge on top. But for in this case, for the very simplistic design of it, or starting of it, we'll use a cylinder and a sphere. So, but for the forearm, this is where I would really try to play around with this. And keep in mind too, you can also throw in organic versions of this cylinder. It doesn't have to be, a cylinder with one tapered edge and real stiff like that. It could be similar to that, or it could be that. Whatever. I'm not saying there's a right and wrong way to do this stuff. I'm saying try these things out. But another way to do it is to draw it bigger here, right? The connection point, the overlap of that muscle of the forearm, and then maybe bend it and exaggerate it. So now what happens is you're starting to incorporate gesture into this idea of cylinder drawing, I think anyways. So for the upper arm, I might explain that start with a circle for now. But for the upper arm, let me bend this over this way, or actually it needs to widen out the other way. But I'm going to put a bit of a bend to the curves to those areas, and again curves to these areas. And you see it's very almost whimsical. I don't know. It's just not as stiff, but it's exaggerated as well. And then maybe for the hand, maybe bend it back this way. And again, this is kind of me trying to incorporate a little bit more of a sense of gesture into it, but a lot of exaggeration. So same thing with the fingers, and I'm running out of room here, so let me shrink this down and move it. So same thing with the fingers. And again, I do like the idea of adding gesture first. So what I'm going to do here is, again, I'm going to bend those fingers. You can actually start with these little stickman versions, but again, try to get a little bit of a flow or a bend into the segments. Another way to do this is to do these sweeping, overlapping ovals. I tend to find that helps as well for not stiffening up too much on the fingers. So you can see this one right here. It already looks and feels stiff, which isn't a big deal. You can go back and correct that as you redraw, but you have to really mentally go back and say, you know what? Okay, I started very stiff and structural. I need to really go, more organic with this next stage of the work. So you might jump in here and say, okay, now I'm going to really try to throw in some circles and some curves. There's got to be a little bit of rigidness to things like knuckles and some maybe tiny little angles. But then you really, the webbing, you really try to soften it up and get some organic, like the pads of the finger, they generally, got to look pretty organic. And remember too, you can generally accentuate that stuff by throwing curves. And this doesn't have to be the last iteration of this either. It's just another, again, my only goal there was to soften up from something that would look too cubical or, cylindrical and boxy and all that, stereometric. I think that's the word, but actually, I don't know. I haven't seen a whole lot of people use that word. So I got it from Roberto Asti's anatomy book, which is in my library. But yeah, stereometric drawing generally applies to, like when you're drawing the body, you go like head, torso, pelvis, in a very blocky kind of approach, right? Which is, similar to what we're doing here with the arms. So at any rate, just so you know the term I'm trying to reference there, I kind of just look at it like a building block approach. Just you're using basic primitive shapes. Okay, so now let's go for something other than an arm. Oh, and by the way, so the next step, obviously you would apply anatomy over this, right? And that's where it all kind of comes together. At first it looks a bit funny, but you can apply anatomy over this, and then it's like, oh, okay, it's just a very elongated depth perception. So it's fun to do, and it's really, I think, very important to do for comics, because it's almost like if you don't do it, you're going to lack a certain amount of depth in your scenes, and almost you're going to lack an ability to stretch what's there in your imagination to something more imaginative, something more wild and crazy. Like I love distorted styles. I always mention like Jay Lee and Sam Keith and people like that, where they have a really good sense of all these ideas that go into comics and anatomy and all that good stuff, but they add this distortion that's just fun to look at. So anyways, J. Scott Campbell does it real well, with elongated legs on the women and things like that. So let's try another one. Well, yeah, let's actually try a leg, but let's do, again, we want to think foreshortening. So what I'll try, because I think this is another good example, or exercise I should say, is start with a point and a point. And say, okay, I'm going to try to stretch the anatomy from there to there. And it's going to be a leg in this case. So I'll start with an opening for the pelvis, something like this, right? And, okay, so it's real easy to look at this and go, well, we'll just, we'll take the upper leg and go like this, lower leg and go like this. We'll attach with some curves so it doesn't look too awfully stiff, hopefully. Hopefully not. There's a hip. Here's a foot. Something like this. Right, but there's no foreshortening there. That's just a flat leg, right? It's a straight view to the leg. So again, that's real easy to do, and that's why I think practicing this can make a big difference. So I'm still going to go with the basic starting point. One of the things that maybe I should have pointed this out early on is when you do foreshortening, remember that if you were to take a rectangle like this, crisscross your corners, right? Find center. Yeah, and you can do that over and over again. There's your center point, right? Well, in perspective, that same rectangle, let me see if I can just distort it. But you can draw it and it works the same way. I'm just going to try to expedite this if I can, hopefully. Why is it giving me a calculator? Okay, drag that. Oop, come on. You got to hold these points and distort that. Yeah, that works. I mean, perspective's perspective. So even though I distorted that, it would work the same way if I drew that. Look how far down that halfway point is in that forced perspective of the vanishing points, or the perspective lines going to a vanishing point of about right there. See that? That holds true no matter what. Even though like I said, I took that shortcut and distorted it. Even if you drew that, that's the way it works. So imagine that you're trying to foreshorten this. I'm just going to do this as a loose representation because, I don't know, I find it next to impossible to really convey this as I'm drawing. But I like it there as a loose guide. So again, if I was to draw this, look how far down that center line is. That's insane. I don't even know how I'm going to do that. So I don't know that I would go that far, but I need to be aware of it. My point is this: when you're really trying to foreshorten something, there is a lot of, and it kind of held true in this arm, even though I didn't use any guides there. That upper arm's about the halfway point, the elbow's about the halfway point, and it's pretty far up. So same thing. So let's just say the knee needs to be about here, right? And we know that the hip is roughly about here. And then we take that curvature. Remember, the bones come out right here. They come in this way and then down, kind of, sort of, something like that. So the leg protrudes out this way, right? Get this curvature that goes from the side of the knee like this. Here's the knee somewhere in there. And so now we have to make this work all the way down through here. So we're going to give her this big, long lower leg. Side of the knee kind of comes down like this. Oh, and forgive me, I jumped past the cylinders. I'm sorry. But I guess I feel more comfortable trying to go for the anatomy. And see, even at this point, well, let me add a big foot here. Let's see what we get. But even at this point, I feel like I needed to bring that knee up even further. That's how forced, how dramatic this perspective would be. Now, if I have the foot pointing down, it's probably going to look a bit silly. Yeah, I don't think I like that. Let me try to show the bottom of the foot, because really, it's about that area, right, where you would probably get the bottom of the foot. But what I need to do is I need to make this foot pretty big. I suck at drawing feet. Anybody out there suck at drawing feet? Am I the only one? Just me, huh? Okay. All right, so something like this. But again, I would really play around with the size relationship of that. So I feel like there's a little bit of perspective there, but not the extreme version that I was wanting to go for. But this is my point. You really have to practice this to really even get this to go, because it's more common through habit to just go with like a safe version, or you kind of just get comfortable doing a little bit of foreshortening. But that's where playing around with this can help you, because you experiment with more extreme versions of it. So let me bring this over to the side. I don't think it's a bad leg. It's just not as extreme as I was going for. I'm almost picturing like she's walking on a glass floor, or float. She could be floating, right? Something like that. And then maybe the other leg would be up or something. I don't think I got... This part doesn't look right, but... Something like that. So let me draw another one over here and try to take it even further. And I'm just going to go for it now because I've already got a reference point. So again, I want to bring this knee way up here. I want to try to constrict, if that's the right word, compact all this information into a shorter amount of area. So the vastus medialis comes up, starts to point towards the ASIS, right? It's not generally that noticeable unless it's a very defined person that really works their muscles out. You generally see it almost like more of a faded curve through here. So you get that side meaty part of the leg in here. You get the quadriceps that come up, point like an upside down heart through here. So I'm just trying to give you a bit of idea as I just place the anatomy real quick. The vastus medialis comes down around the side of the knee pretty much. You get the inner part of the leg, the bone of the leg here. And so now, same thing. I'm going to try to really stretch this out. Have this get really big. Obviously the ankle wouldn't be bigger than the knee, but we're looking up at it, so we have to try to make that happen. And again, I'm going to push the foot even more so it's lower and a bit bigger. Maybe change the perspective just a little bit. I feel like we'd see a little bit more of that plane change. Plus, you do have a range of movement where you can move your toes upward. I feel like the ankle would be a little lower. And forgive me, I'm not drawing toes. I know I'm taking a bit of a cheat here. But okay, so there, hopefully you see that leg has a little bit more of a feeling of being elongated. Now, the other tricky part about this is really looking up at everything. So looking up at the knee and looking up at the leg. And again, those wrapping lines can really help with that. So just like if you were drawing a suit design on your character, really draw these wrapping lines going up and away from your view so that you can get a sense for other areas that would go up and overlap away from your view. Everything from the muscle groups to the bony landmarks, whatever you can that points to that. Also, one final tip, and I'll bring this one to a close, even though it's it's pretty basic stuff, but hopefully it's giving you some ideas, is that try drawing it like this first, or with comic reference, whatever you want to do there. But really, I recommend trying to do it first from your imagination, then researching and finding some poses that are close, not dead on, just close, and then trying to check the work. I really think that's a good way to go, because what happens is if you start with the reference, you generally will just focus too heavily on exactly what you're seeing. I feel that this way helps you explore your own imagination and ability to problem solve. So, and if you're more of a beginner, maybe scratch that and go with the reference first. I don't want to confuse anybody and say, like, oh, this is the only way to do it. Like I mentioned, I want to say 2 times in the video, I never say it's the only way to do it. I just like to share the way that, maybe I'm at my current level or things that have worked for me in the past. But I think we need to really always look at a variety of methods from a variety of artists. And our job as creative individuals is piecing it all together and making our own style and our own process. And then again, sharing that with others is part of it as well, so that we can all learn and grow together. So thanks so much for tuning in. I know it was a long one for just these basic scribbles, but again, hopefully it's more of the theory and ideas that helps you combat this crazy topic. So more on the way very soon. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and bye for now.